Imagine stepping into a world where your character moves with precision and reacting seamlessly to every input you make. Whether it's a swift sprint, a sudden jump, or a dynamic combat move, it all comes to life through the power of Unreal's enhanced input system. And today, we're diving right into it. This video is a direct response to a comment from Amarjit FB3LK, I'm sorry about that, who wanted to learn how to control animations using the enhanced input system. Thank you, Amarjit, for the great suggestion. If you are new here or want to catch up, I recommend checking out the complimentary video Understanding Character Animation in Unreal Engine Sequence and Blendspace, which you can find in the description below. There we explore the foundations of character animation. Now we're taking a step further by connecting inputs to actions in animations, giving you the control to bring your character to life. But before we jump in, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss out on more Unreal Engine tips, free assets, and pro-level game development insights to help you build your stunning projects and grow your career in the gaming industry. And if you are looking for the right methodology to build a successful career in video games, whether they are jobs or independent business model, visit Wooloo.com and learn more about the Game Creator Accelerator, our lifetime mentorship program that is changing careers and life of people out of stressing conditions of the industry. Now, let's get started. Before starting this process, I will launch a version project of Unreal 5.4.4, though you should know that this is something we can use in different versions of Unreal, including 5.5. Select Games and Third-Person Shooter. I will add the starter content, though this is nothing we're going to use, and add just a name. The first step is understanding how does the input action and the input mashing context works. First off, create a new folder called Game and create a subfolder called Input. I like to classify these folders because these are the content that I am adding to my project. Open the folder, right-click, and look for the option Input. The first thing we're going to add is an action. Pick the input action. Because this is an input action, we'll start with IA, and let's call this action Move. You can identify an input action really quick because you have this kind of a gamepad. Double-click on it, and by default, you have these parameters. The one that is going to call your attention is the value type, which in this case, by default, is a Boolean. But because this is a movement action, you need to work with axis. That means that you will work in 2 dimensions. Imagine that you're using the gamepad and you're moving the joystick, and the joystick moves in 2 dimensions. The same thing applies when we're using the keyboard. So instead of using the digital bool, look for the option of Axis 2D. Save and close. Let's repeat the process with another input action. In this case, let's call this one Jump. It could be Shoot as well, but it's one punctual action. Double-click to open it, and in this case, we are not going to use the Axis 2D because this is just one action. It is like shooting when you shoot one weapon that is not going to repeat, or in this case, a jump. Save and close. Most of the actions that you will use in your game are resumed between these 2. The second step is to define the input mapping context, which defines how we're going to use the actions that we created a moment ago in a map of actions, in a map of things that are going to happen. And we're going to link this with the controls of the gamepad or also with our keyboard and mouse. Right-click, select Input, and now pick the one named Input Mapping Context. Because this is an input mapping context, IMC at the beginning, let's call this one Game Input, or even better, Input Default. Open the input mapping context. Now I'll show you how to link the actions with the mapping. In the up left section, click on the plus button to add the first action. From the list, we can pick the ones that we created. By default, this project has also input actions, and they have the same name that we added. So it doesn't matter at this moment which one we'll use. This is why they are repeated here, like the jump and move and move. As you can see in the path, they are in different directions inside your project. I will pick the one that I created, in this case, the jump. Now you have the action. Click on this arrow to expand, and click on this arrow again. You can select the keyboard that you want to use by just clicking on this. Look that it turns yellow, and now click the button that you want to be linked to this action. In my case, let's say the key will be W. As I click W, it is picked here. You can also select directly what key you want to use. If you have your gamepad connected to your computer, you can also click here and use the button, the joystick, or anything that it is on the gamepad, and will be linked as well to this action. To add another device, for example a gamepad, click on this plus button and now select, for example, gamepad, and let's say left trigger. Now you'll see it is related to a gamepad, and this is the button that will call the action. At this moment, I'm going to remove it. The second step is defining how we're going to use the relation between the action and, in this case, this button. In fact, I just realized that W won't be the perfect key for the jumping. I was thinking in terms of movement, so let's click again here and use the spacebar. And the other action we added was related to the movement. So add another mapping, select the action that we created. It is on this folder, correct. And now let's select the keys that we'll use. Keep in mind that we define this as a 2D axis. So it means we can use 4 different keys to control the different directions of the object. Let's start with the first one, which will be the forward. But I can also add the S for the backwards, the A to the left, and the D to the right. Starting with the W, which means that we're going to move forward, look at this section called the modifiers. This is when you want to add some extra element to modify how this is going to work. Click on the plus, and in the list, pick the swivel input axis value. This is the only modifier that we'll use, which defines how we'll move forward. Because moving backwards is the opposite direction of a moving forward, first we add a modifier that will be the same as the swivel input axis value. But then we add another modifier, which is the negation of this. Pick the one called negate. So if you click on S, now it's going to do the opposite of what we're doing with W, which was only swivel input axis value. In this case, because we're going to negate this one, we'll move in the opposite direction. In the case of our movement to right and left, is even easier because we don't have to swivel the input axis value. For D, we don't need to add anything. And for A, the only thing we need to add is a modifier to negate. Save. And if you want to have even more control about the negation, you can click here in the details and define what of the axes you want to negate. If you disable one of them, that axis won't be negated. Close. Now that we have an understanding of what is the input and what are the actions, what rest is to know how do I assign this to my character when I'm playing the game. Remember that in the world settings, you have a game mode override. If you go to that game mode override and open it, you will find a default pawn class. Click on this, and you will be redirected to the BP third person. Open it. In the event graph of this blueprint, go to the top, and you will find this section called Add Input Mapping. What it does is identify what is the controller, cast this player, and then look at this node, which is called the Enhance Input Local Player Subsystem. This will look for mappings, enhanced mappings for this project, and if they are available, then you can add a mapping context to control this blueprint character using that mapping. In the details of the add mapping context, you have a parameter called mapping context. Click on the arrow and you have the one that we created a second ago and the default that is included with the template project. Let's leave the one that is added by default. Now let's visit the mapping provided with the project. Click on Browse, and here you find the mapping. It is in third person, input, and if you click in the Actions folder, here are the default actions for this project. As you remember, we could move, look, and jump. If you play the game, moving the mouse, this is the action of look. Using the keyboard, you can move in different directions, and jump, which is with the spacebar. Back to the input folder, open the IMC default. In this mapping, you will find something similar to what we did a moment ago. I usually take this map as a reference for any of my projects because it is a great starting point. Let's close. The next part is how you call the actions on these maps. We, in a way, initialized the map, but now we need to call the actions. If we take this same BP third-person character, move to one side, in fact, you can see the different actions here because you have first the enhanced input action IA look. This is the one that it is provided with the project, but remember that you also create your own. We can go to the input actions, and I'm going to rename this input game, and I will rename this move as well, game at the end. If you open the input, look at the names are updated. Now let's go back to the BP third person character, and let's say that I want to call that input action. Right click and look for input action, jump, and here you have the one provided by the template and the one that you created. Here is the input game. Because these two actions are exactly the same, it doesn't matter if I can remove this one and use this one. The only thing is that this action is not linked to this map, to the IMC default, so it won't be called. Remove this one. What rest is starting making connections. For the IA look, you have several parameters. The ones you want to call are first, when this thing will be triggered. It means when these actions will be called. One option is with the mouse. Remember how this action was set. You can go to the action and identify when this action will be called. And in our case, we have two axes to consider, or values to consider, which are the X and the Y. The X will control the yaw of the character, which means that you can turn to the left or to the right. And the Y will control the pitch, if you're going to look up or down. A similar principle applies for the movement. Again, this is an action created which is called the IA move. You can see the rest of the parameters here, but what you need to control, or the parameters that you will use to control the movement, are in X and Y. And here you can see the add movement depending on what you want to identify. For example, let's say that you want to go right or you want to go forward. The negations of these actions, remember, that are set on the mapping, will create the opposite movement. So you only need to use the right, because if you move to the opposite direction, that will be controlled automatically because we defined it in the mapping. The same applies when we're doing the movement forward or backwards. The final action is the jump action. This is an easier one because we're just going to call it when they started and when it is completed. In started, we call the action jump with the node jump, and we completed stop jumping with the corresponding node. to watch these actions working, go back. Let's say that we want to see what happens here. Play your project. Select the BP third-person character. And look, here I am just looking in different directions, and we are calling the input action look. If I start moving, we're calling the movement input. And if I jump, we're calling the jump action. I know that understanding all these mechanics can be overwhelming. Game dev is an elephant that you can only eat one bite at a time, but you also need a methodology and a path to you don't get lost and keep your motivation high. The reason behind the Game Creator Accelerator is to show you how you can achieve it. You have the potential to start now. Visit Woolon.com in the description to learn more about the program and subscribe so we can have a chat one-on-one. I promise it will be a conversation filled with important inputs you can use now. So what are you waiting for? Check out the description and take a solid step in the gaming industry, no matter your current knowledge. The third step is connecting these actions with the animations. If you click on the viewport for the BP third-person character, well, in fact, you don't have to click on the viewport. What you need is to click on the BP third-person character and look in details for anim. It is a parameter called animation mode. In this case, use animation blueprint and another parameter called anim class. To identify the class you will use for controlling the animation, you will use this anim class. Let's go to this blueprint animation. I will be redirected to the animation of Queen, and because animation of Queen is a child of another class, which is the ABP Mani, I will open the ABP Mani where the animation is defined. It is besides the ABP Queen. Here you have the anim graph and the event graph. The anim graph will control the type of animations that will be presented when this character is updating his values. We have another video where we explain how you can create these blueprint animations and how you can control the animations based on parameters. The question here is, how can I pass a parameter from the character, in this case the BP third-person character, to the animation so the animation, when it receives this parameter, can do something different? Back to the event graph. You will see that you have several components, several nodes that you use to identify the speed of the character and how to handle the corresponding animation. But let's say that you want to define an extra parameter, an extra variable that will make the character do something crazy. Maybe I should say different instead of crazy. Go back to the BP third-person character and let's add a new parameter. Even though the speed is controlled by this component called the character movement, let's say that we want to define a new parameter called speed. In variables, create this one, call it speed, and the type of speed will be a float. Compile and save. What I want is to inspect this value to identify what is the speed that this character has in order to do something with the animation. Now that I have the parameter and I compile, go to the blueprint animation. At the beginning of this process, you can initialize the value of the float to whatever value you want. But let's say that now I want to constantly keep the information of this parameter, of this value. Well, the first thing is I need to create inside the blueprint animation a new parameter of the same type. So it's a speed type float. Why do I need to create a parameter here in the blueprint animation? Because you can only access in the anim graph the parameters defined in the blueprint animation. The next step is to get the information of the speed parameter that we added to the BP third-person character and update it directly in the ABP Mani. And once we have this value here, then I can use the animation graph and make the changes that I need. To collect the information of that parameter constantly or consistently, you can go to the end of this process or at the beginning before this sequence, or add another pin for the sequence where you're going to define or you're going to update this speed. We can use this same getOwin actor, paste it here, and we need this because we need to cast and confirm that the character is of the type BP third person character, because that's where we defined this parameter called speed. So from here, cast to BP third person character and add a new pin, and from this one in the sequence to the cast to BP third person character. If the cast is successful, it means that I have access to the blueprint defined for this character. Then I can from here drag a wire and look for get speed. Notice that this get speed refers to the speed of the BP third person character, not the speed that we defined a second ago for this blueprint animation. So get speed, I have this information, and now I'm going to assign the speed from the BP third person character to the speed in the blueprint animation. Drag the speed, set, connect this, and another wire from this speed to this one. Finally, because the speed inside the animation blueprint is updated constantly based on the speed from the BP third person character, I can go to the anim graph, and for any, let's say, changes in the states, I am able to use that parameter to define when we're going to walk, we're going to run, when we're going to be in the state of idle, or anything else. As I mentioned, you can check the other videos where we cover how to create animations in Unreal that is on the description of this one. Please share in the comments if this video provided you with the content you need or what other areas you want to cover in the future. And be sure to check out the next video on understanding character animation in Unreal Engine, Sequence, and Blendspace. If this video added value to you, like, subscribe, and ring the bell so you never miss tips and tutorials on Unreal Engine and how to build your successful career in video games. Until next time, keep creating, keep sharing, and most importantly, keep dreaming big. I'll see you soon, my fellow creators.